My name is Justin. I get to be one of the pastors on staff here, and I want to tell you, Hope Church, it's so good to be here with you today. If this is your first time ever coming to Hope Church, I want you to know that this is a better place because you are here today. We are so thrilled to have you, and we are continuing this teaching series. This changes everything. And over the past few weeks, we've been walking through the book of Hebrews. That's where we're going to be today. Hebrews chapter 9 is where you can start heading in your Bibles. If you don't have a Bible, we would love to get you a Bible, or you can download the YouVersion Bible app. It's a great resource, but Hebrews 9 is where we're going to be. And over the past few weeks, we've been looking at what are those events, those situations, those people that change everything in our lives. And then how we take that to a more biblical situation and a spiritual situation. How does Jesus change everything in our lives? And Rick, a few weeks ago, talked about how there's a relationship sometimes. Sometimes we catch feelings for someone else, and all of a sudden we start thinking differently, and it changes the dynamic of a relationship. And I'm going to take that one step further and talk about how when you're in that relationship, sometimes you start to change maybe your perspective or your thoughts on things. You start to have a change of heart. Why? Because now there's two people coming together, and all of a sudden you each have tastes, you each have preferences, you each have thoughts, you each have convictions, you each have different ideas that you're bringing into that relationship. See, this is Lindsay and I when we were first dating. This is the first picture that we can find of each other. We love flowers. We're just taking that in. No, I don't know what we're looking at. I don't understand what's going on there. But this is about 20 years ago. We were 18, right around there. And which is crazy that I can say 20 years ago I was 18. I'm getting older, I think. But this is when we first started coming together. And what happened? Two people came together, and all of a sudden I started to have a change of heart about certain things. Lindsay, one of her favorite desserts was cheesecake. And I was like, man, no, it's disgusting. It even sounds disgusting. Like, it just doesn't sound right. And she was like, no, you should try it. And sure enough, I tried it. I have this change of heart. And I'm like, this is not so bad. They should have named it something different, something more appealing, right? This is a good thing. Yeah, she likes going to the movies. I hate going to the movies. You know why? Because I'm a personal space person. And listen, I know how the movies work. There are prime seats, right? The seats that you guys don't sit in here, you all go off to the sides because you're like me. And so there are prime seats in the middle, in the center. And if you go there, people come too close to you. I get that. I sit off to the side in the corner away from everyone. And then some weirdo comes up and sits next to me still. And I hate going to the movies because I can't stand that. But she likes going. And now all of a sudden I'm like, hey, we should go on a date. Let's go to the movies. Let's go spend some time. I remember when we were dating still, she was like, let's go see Lord of the Rings. Oh my goodness, nothing worse in my entire life. And it was like 12 hours long of people walking and talking and walking some more and then talking some more. And it's like, some of you love that. I don't love that. But she likes that. And so now all of a sudden it's not so bad, right? I had a change of heart. That changed everything for me. Lindsay loves music. I'm not that much of a music guy. But when she wanted tickets to one of her favorite bands, you better believe I was downtown in Providence trying to get to that ticket window. And not only was I down there trying to get to that ticket window, I had this truck. It was a big truck, and I could not find a parking spot. And I remember just circling. And remember, this is ticket window days. This is like you couldn't buy online, right? And I was like, I have to get there, but I'm running late for work. And there's finally, I was like, I got to go for it. And there's this police officer like right by the ticket window. He's parked. He's got a detail. And I was like, I get it. I just double parked him. And I ran over to the window. We made eye contact. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm getting the ticket for sure. Scrambled back there, sprinted back to my car. Why? Because it changed everything. Everything that I knew was right, it changed. Because I had to get her those tickets. See, when we go through life, it changes everything. And it's easy to say that in a relationship where we care about someone. This isn't just romantic relationships, it's our friendships too. When two people, when we care about someone, we start to kind of adapt towards them. We have a change of heart towards them. But it's even harder when maybe we don't like the person so much. You ever done that and you had to pray and say, God, show me why you love this person so much because I'm having a hard time seeing it. But you let God try and change your heart towards them. And then there's just this change that happens in life that's so difficult. You ever have a new boss that comes into work and they change all the structure, all the systems, everything that you're used to? That's a difficult change. It's a hard change. It's a change many of you have gone through. And see, that's what we're walking into as we're in Hebrews chapter 9. That's what's happened is what the Israelites were used to All of it had changed. All of it was turned upside down. And so the teacher of Hebrews, he says, the first covenant between God and Israel had regulations for worship and a place of worship here on earth. And then he goes on to explain this. You guys say, oh man, we've seen this picture before, right? Because Rick has brought this up. He's done a great job of explaining this tabernacle. But this is the tabernacle. This is the tent. And so there's the holy place over to the side, the bigger room, where the priests can come in and they do their rituals and their ceremonies. And then beyond the curtain is the most holy place. And only the high priest can go in. And he goes in once a year, and he offers this blood sacrifice for forgiveness of sins. And we say, well, why are we talking about this again? You know, I asked myself that question as we were getting ready for this week, because I'm saying, man, I feel like we're saying the same thing over and over again. How do I say something different than what Rick has already taught you guys for the past several weeks? And why? But as you read the passage, the teacher keeps bringing up the same things. And it has to come back to that idea that change is hard. And this is a monumental change for these people. It's something that they've been used to. Think about this. They've been worshiping God in the same way for their entire lives, and then the generations before them. And now they're being told it has to be different. So the teacher, he's going to explain, this is how it was, but this is what I'm asking you to change. This is what it was, but now I'm asking you to think differently. And think of how hard change is. See, I'm a person, I love change. I love change because change is exciting. Change is fun. There's adventure in change. But some of you don't feel that same way about change. Some of you say, why would we change anything if things are good the way that they are? Things don't need to change because change is just messy and it's ugly and I like my life the way it is. And what I know, what I've found is that whether you're that person that loves change or that person that struggles with change is still hard. Here's how I know this is. This summer, I was in Detroit, Michigan with our students. And Lindsay made some changes to our house. She painted the cabinets. She did this. They look so good. Our cabinets look so much better than they ever did. But when she painted them, she decided that she was going to change where things went in the cabinets too. And even yesterday, so this was July, yesterday, November, I go to get a glass of water and I still am going to the wrong cupboard. Months later, because change is hard. And what these guys are facing is so much harder than getting a glass out of the cupboard. And so that's why the teacher is being so repetitious with this, because he's trying to help them get past this. He's trying to help them understand that there's a better way, and I know that you're used to the old way, but you got to trust me on this. And so he explains all that, and he says, this is an illustration, verse 9, pointing to the present time for the gifts and sacrifices that the priests offer. And look, this is so important because this is going to set up everything else. He says, those gifts and sacrifices are not able to cleanse the consciences of the people who bring them. He says there were sacrifices made, but those sacrifices, they never actually met the needs of the people. That yes, they received that forgiveness of sin, and that happened every year. But it failed to set free their minds, set free their conscience. You all know this because when you were little, you had something happen in your home. Maybe you broke a lamp or you made a mess, and what'd you do? You cleaned up after it. You hope that mom and dad would never find out about it. And you cleaned up and they got home and no one noticed a thing. But you still had that worry in you. See, I did this. In high school, I was in detention constantly. And my parents would ask, like, hey, how come you go home from school late? And I'd say, oh, I'm going to Andy's house, or I'm going wherever. Or this was the one that they were proud of me in the moment, because I was like, oh, I'm staying after school for help. And they thought I was a good student, but really it was like the complete opposite of it. And so every time, though, even though I'd wait and I'd say, am I in the clear? Am I past this? I still had that nagging. You have that nagging of, am I really in the clear? You have that nagging of, am I really past this? And then you have that nagging of, it's still just holding on to you. I still had guilt about the lies that I told, the trouble I was getting into. And see, the teacher says that those sacrifices, they were there, but they never cleared those consciences. It never set them free from that nagging that was holding on to them. He says that old system, it only dealt with food and drink, various cleansing ceremonies. He said there were physical regulations that were in effect. And look at this, only until a better system could be established. There was something better coming. And that old system, it just focused on the ritual, on the cleansing. I'm so glad that you got to hear from our team that we were able to send to Hamtramck, Michigan, because the people that they went and ministered to, our Muslim friends that they shared the love of Jesus with, they operate out of a similar system. When they go into the mosque to pray, what do they have to do first? They have to cleanse. They have to wash before they can enter into that ceremony of praying. And then if they sin, they have various ways and amounts of times, quantities that they have to cleanse. They have to wash before they can approach God again. And see, this is a similar system. It's not the same system, but the teacher tells us that there's a better system that was coming. And because we need to get free from that nagging, from that conscience. And so what's the better system? Jesus has now become the high priest over all the good things that have come. He has entered that greater, more perfect tabernacle in heaven, which was not made by human hands and is not part of the created world. Now, the teacher talks about this in chapter 8 as well. And basically what he's saying is that there is the tabernacle that people used was a mirror. It was a picture of a tabernacle in heaven. And so he says that Jesus took the place of that high priest in heaven. And so he's the one that can go into that most holy place. But he says the tabernacle was representative of what was already in heaven. And what changes, this is what changes everything, that with his own blood, not the blood of goats and calves, he entered into the most holy place. He did it once for all time, and he secured our redemption forever. And this changes everything. This is the event, because now, instead of using the blood of an animal, instead of going through the same thing over and over again, instead of having to go in there year after year, there was a sacrifice made by Jesus, who was God, is God, who is the Son of God, and is perfect and holy and set apart and completely different. And because of that, he's a perfect sacrifice. And so it doesn't have to be made year after year. And he secures our redemption. He redeems us back to God. He reconciles us with God. He puts us in relationship with God. He lets us enter the presence of God because of the forgiveness that you and I have received, all because of this sacrifice. The teacher says under the old system, he goes back to that old system again to help them understand where they were. He said the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer could cleanse people's bodies from ceremonial impurity. Again, it all had to come back to that cleansing. But then he says, just think, this is so cool, just think how much more the blood of Christ will do what? Purify your conscience. The thing that the old system couldn't do. Just think about how much it will purify your conscience from the sinful deeds. And look at this. So that we can. So now we get to see what changes. So that we can worship the living God. See, this sacrifice took place. It had to happen. It's the perfect sacrifice. And we say, this changes everything. But what did it change? It's all happened so that we can worship. Can you say that with me? So that we can. Let's try that again. So that we can. South County, I can't hear you. So that we can. And it all comes back to the fact that we get to worship the living God. See, before, the old covenant never cleared our consciences. It never left us. And now the new covenant allows us to be free from that. It takes that away, and it all happens so that we can live this life of worship. Now remember, we've talked about this so many times. Worship is more than music. We just took this time of worship and we sang some songs. That's a small, minute, tiny little bit of what worship is. When we worship is the decisions that we make. Worship is the way that we interact with the people around us. Worship is the time that we spend with God. Worship is when we wake up in the morning and we put God first before everything else. Worship is when we care for the people beside us and we serve the people that are in our neighborhoods and in our communities. Worship is so much more than music. And we've been freed from our consciences. They've been purified so that we can worship the living God. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that changes everything, because we're no longer stuck to the works, the sacrifice, and having to do that year after year and hold on to those things. We're free. So all that we can do is put all of our focus back on God. We don't have to worry about anything else. We just got to make sure that our focus, our attention is on God. And if we do that, then we get to worship God with everything that we are. So let me ask you this question. Do you have that kind of eagerness inside of you? Is that the way that you wake up and you say, man, this is my change of heart? You know, I said, Lindsay, she changed my heart towards things. You have that change of heart where you say, man, I'm free, and that allows it so that I can. Do you have that kind of change of heart? Let me ask you this question. Do you have an eager heart or an apathetic heart? Do you have an eager heart? Are you looking for how you can worship God and how you can serve God each and every day? Are you looking for those opportunities? Or are you apathetic? Are you along for the ride? Here, let me break this down more for you. When we have an eager heart, we're motivated. We're driven. We're excited about what's next because we know that each and every day comes with opportunity. When we're eager, we know that God can show up in any way at any time. When we're eager, we see that God works in our lives, and He works in the lives of the people around us, that He can literally change a life and turn it upside down. And that gives us an eagerness, that gives us an excitement about each and every day. But when you're apathetic, don't you do everything out of obligation? Yeah, I guess I should show up to church on Sunday. I guess I should get in a group. I know that community service is good, so I'm going to, serve other people. I really don't want to because I'd rather be golfing. I'd rather be doing my thing. I'd rather be anywhere but where I am. That's what happens when we're apathetic. See, when we're eager, man, we have a fullness of life, a rich and satisfying life. Life abundantly. See, we start to see things with a positive spin on it. We start to see how God has blessed us time and time again. When we have a fullness in life, man, every day is filled with joy and excitement and just goodness. But when you have an apathetic life, isn't your life dull? Don't you just kind of go through the day? And I'm saying this because this is my own experience. I know I just go through the motions, and you work for 8, 9, 10, however many hours. You get home, you make dinner, you watch some TV, you go to bed, and the next day is the same thing over again. That's what happens when we live an apathetic life. We don't see that the next day is a new opportunity. The next day is another chance for God to show me how He was better than even what I've already seen. The next day is so much greater a chance to be able to see God in action. The next day, God's going to give me a different chance to share Him with someone else and to show someone how much He loves them. The next day is another opportunity for me to receive God's love. See, we don't have to dread the next day. We can look forward to it. When we have an eager life, this is my favorite one. When we have an eager life, you start to see the people around you. You start to see their needs. You start to see their hurt. You start to see their hearts. And that builds compassion in you. It changes something in you. It changes the way that you interact with other people. And it helps you see how you can come alongside someone else. And how you can maybe just care for someone else. But when we have that apathetic heart, we're self-concerned. We're inwardly focused. We're self-centered. We're selfish. Here's how I know it, because when I live that way, what are my prayers about? My prayers are about me. God, if you could just help me through this one thing. God, if you could just give me what I need right now. God, if you could just do this for me, do this for me, do this for me. But that's not how we're supposed to pray. Our prayers are supposed to be focused on God first. And then His will, what He would want to see happen in the world around us. Do you have an eager heart or an apathetic heart? See, how do you get that eager heart? Let's go back here. So that's why Jesus is the one who mediates the new covenant between God and people, so that all who are called can receive the eternal inheritance God has promised them. See, we get the eager heart because it has to come from Jesus. We get the freedom from our consciousness because it has to come from Jesus. It has to come from that sacrifice. God has promised that to us. For Christ died to do what? To set us free from the penalty of the sins that we have committed under the first covenant, under the sins that they had committed under the first covenant. And so there's a freedom that exists there. But it had to come through Jesus. And then he talks about this idea of an inheritance. And actually you'll see the teacher walks into this idea and he says, hey, when someone dies, they leave a will. And he says the will, verse 17, goes into effect only after the person's death. While the person who made it is still alive, the will cannot be put into effect. That's really common sense, I feel like, right? Someone isn't dead yet. You can't take their house from them while they're still living in it. And so, but he's saying that's how this works. And then he says that's why even the first covenant was put into effect with the blood of an animal. And he said the blood confirms the covenant God has made with you. See, when I walked into this, I always struggle with this. I'm like, God, why? Why did they even have to do the sacrifices in the old covenant? Like, why does it have to be replaced? Why was it even a thing? I just don't understand that. I don't get why. And I'm finding I'm more of an animal person than I ever thought I was. Because I'm like, why'd they kill these animals? That's terrible, right? And why couldn't they just offer some good berries and put those down and lay them down before God? And it's because if you go back to Leviticus 17, God shares that with us because it has to be a trade of a life for life. It wouldn't make sense to say berries for my life, because who would trade that? Who would say that that's just and that that's fair? You know, if I said I'll trade you $1,000 for $1, you'd say that's not fair. And so the blood signifies the life that's given for the sin. And so it had to be the blood, and the blood is what confirms that this covenant was even in place. So jump ahead, because now he explains again about how it's the same tabernacle that Jesus said. Let me actually jump ahead further. He says he did not enter heaven to offer himself again and again. Jesus didn't enter into that tabernacle again and again, like the high priest here on earth who enters the most holy place year after year with the blood of an animal. So he says Jesus doesn't have to do that year after year because his blood is different. And so this is, yes, it's a sacrifice of cleansing, but it's not the same thing. He says if that had been necessary, Christ would have had to die again and again since the world began. But now, once for all time, he has appeared at the end of age to remove sin by his own death and sacrifice. This is what's available to you and I, to be able to receive the sacrifice of Jesus. And it's not that sacrifice that had to be made year after year, but it's a forgiveness of sin that lasts into eternity. Now, the common question here is, well, then how come I can't just continue to live this life of sin? Why can't I just continue to sin and sin and sin if it's already been forgiven once and for all time? Well, think back to verse 14, because we had a change of heart. The sacrifice came not so that we can sin forever, so that we can worship the living God. And when that's the change of heart that takes place in us, then the desire is not to sin as much as we possibly want, but there's a literal change of heart that takes place in you, so that all you want to do, or should want to do, is worship God and to see God in that way. Doesn't mean that there's not times that enters back into our lives and that's not the first priority, but it means that there's a real change in heart that's happened in you, so that we can worship the living God. Now, these last two verses we're going to go over, they're a little bit different. The teacher, he kind of shifts gears, and so he's been talking about the old covenant that was, and then what he's asking them to do, and now he actually speaks a little bit towards the future, and he says, just as each person is destined to die once, and after that comes judgment. So he says, hey, when each one of us is going to die, and then each one of us, when we reach Jesus, we're going to be judged for what we've done. He says, so Christ was offered once for all time as a sacrifice to take away the sins of many people. He will come again, meaning Jesus will come again. And look at this, not to deal with our sins, because that's already been dealt with. Remember, once for all time, it's already happened. He says, but Jesus is going to come again to bring salvation to all who are eagerly waiting for him. To all who are eagerly waiting. Now, you can read these verses in other passages and in other sections of the Bible, and you can look at that and you can say, I want to know all the details. And you can start to get really focused on, when's this going to happen? How's it going to happen? Where's it going to happen? What's Jesus going to look like? What are the signs? What's going to be happening in our world? But the teacher doesn't say, hey, try and figure all that out. What's he say? He says, you need to wait eagerly. See, we believe that Jesus is going to come again. But my hope is that when he comes again, he's going to say, Justin, man, you were eagerly waiting for me. What's it mean to be waiting eagerly? It means that Jesus is my top priority. It means that he's my biggest focus. It means that I'm doing everything I can to serve him and point people back to him. And my hope is that when he sees that, right, he'd say, okay, you did it right. The last thing I would want for me is when Jesus gets back to say, Justin, what were you thinking? What were you doing? What was going on around here? You know, Paul, in his second letter to Timothy, he ends his letter and he says, I have poured out my life. And when I first read that passage, I remember it was when I was about 18 in that picture you saw. And I said, man, this guy Paul is arrogant. Who can say that I poured out my life? And then the more that I learned about it and the more that I understood it, I said, Paul isn't arrogant. He was self-aware. He got to the end of his life and he known what he had done. See, that's my hope, is that when I get to the end of my life, I can say, man, I have poured out my life. I've done everything. I waited eagerly at every moment. And if Jesus shows up, I can say without a doubt, hey, I've poured out my life. I've done everything to point people back to Jesus, to help them see how much he loves them. I'm asking God each day, God, show me that person that I can demonstrate your love to. And I'm taking advantage of those opportunities. I'm looking for that. And I'm saying, God, give me more, right? I want to be eager for God. And the teacher doesn't say, hey, figure it all out, have charts, line it all up, do all this stuff, and then you'll know exactly what's happening. He says, you just better be waiting eagerly for when Jesus comes again. So let me ask you this question one more time. Do you have an eager heart or an apathetic heart? See, some of you, this is new to you, and that's okay. My hope for you would be that you choose to say, yeah, I want to be eager for God. I want to be excited about God. I want to invite that into my life. I've never had that before. Some of you have been Christ followers for a very long time. And you've grown cold. And you've grown apathetic. Today, can you make that switch and say, you know what, I'm tired of being cold. I'm tired of being apathetic. I want to be eager again. Would you make that change? Let's walk into some next steps together. These are in your bulletin, in that connection card that you have. Use your Church Center app. Let us know that you're taking these steps so that way we can be praying for you. Here's the first one. That I need to change my heart towards Jesus. Today, I'm deciding to submit to him for the first time, understanding that his sacrifice changes everything and that it changed everything once for all time. It's not something that you have to do again and again. But can you invite God into your life? Can you submit your life to him and say, God, I know that Jesus' sacrifice was for me. And I want to worship you. I want to worship the living God. And that might be new. And it takes steps into that. It's not this instantaneous, everything changes on a dime. But can you take that step towards Jesus and just say, hey, I am willing to submit. I don't know what the details of that look like. If that's you, let us know. Write that down on your connection card. I would love to follow up with you and help you just get started with some good steps out of that. Here's the other one. That my heart has become apathetic. And this week, I'm going to walk into each day with an eagerness to see Jesus. Not like, oh, there he is over there. He's in the back. It's not that kind of seeing, but it's walking into each day and just saying, God, show me where you are. God, I'm gonna flip that switch and I'm gonna just be with you. I'm gonna spend time with you, and I want to see you in my devotions. I want to see you as I dig into the Bible. I want to see you as I just pray to you, and that you'd speak to me and you'd tell me something new. Would you look for Jesus in your life? Look for those opportunities that he's going to come into, and that he's just going to be there right with you. Would you have that kind of eagerness to just have an excitement again, to have that adventure maybe of some of the change that happens? But would you make that, here's the thing. I can't give you any next step that you're going to say, oh yeah, this is how I make that change from apathy to eagerness. This is you. You have to make a switch. You have to literally flip the switch. If you say, I'll figure that out next week, it's not going to happen. So can you make that change and say, you know what? I am flipping the switch right now, today, because I'm tired of just being miserable and dreading life and being dull and being, just miserable and whatever else is coming along with it. I'm tired of feeling obligated every time I walk into the church and feeling like that's, the last place that I want to be. You're the one that needs to make that switch, because Jesus has already done his part. So will you say, you know what? I'm done with doing that. Today is the day. I'm going to make that switch, and I'm going to be eager for Jesus again. And I'm going to be eagerly waiting for the day of his return. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you so much for how much you love us, how much you care about us. Thank you for the sacrifice that you took for us once for all time. Thank you that we don't have to go to you year after year and find that cleansing, but Jesus, that your sacrifice is forever. But God, help us not to lose sight of that. Help us not to fall into this place of apathy and routine and ritual. But God, help us to see you new each and every day. Holy Spirit, do that kind of work inside each one of us. We pray this in Jesus' name.